Chapter 5. Meow! Pud, 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 dud, 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 dud. One of the younger boys ran circles in the schoolyard, his arms out straight like an aerial's. Watch it, baby, Caleb, an older boy, yelled at him. You watch it, the smaller boy yelled back. You watch it, because I'm going to sign up for that test as soon as they let me, and then I'll fly over your house and kill you. Caleb cuffed him on the back of the head, but not too hard. Get out of here, he said gently. The boy ran off to terrorize some girls his age, including Cammie. I hoped he wouldn't upset her. After 3 more nights of bombing this week, we were all tired. I'm going to do it for the money, one boy said. Take the test, I mean. Me too, a few other boys said. 400 orens. A family could eat on that for a year, if there was any food to buy. Since Tizzy and Eoburn had cut our train lines to most of southern nations, there had been hardly any fruit. Pigs were thin because people had been eating the acorns we used to feed them. There wasn't much fat to cook in. My mother says signing your child up is like selling them for a currency that's going to be useless anyway when Sophorend falls, Peggy said. A shocked silence followed her words. Saying that out loud was treason. I squirmed my toes inside my shoes. You could be imprisoned for treason or even put to death. Why would Peggy's mother say such a thing in front of her? Why would Peggy repeat it? One of the boys said, What do you care anyway? The test's not for girls. Says who? The sign says for children, ages 12 to 14, Meg said. That means boys and girls. What would they want girls for? What use are girls? Meg slammed her hands into his chest and knocked him over. The other kids let up a cheer and formed a circle around them, except for Caleb. He leaned in and took Megs by the arm. I stood in the middle of the circle, my heart thudding too fast. Caleb led Megs away by the elbow. I moved to catch up, but she turned and caught my eye. My feet stopped. Megs looked mad, like she didn't want me to follow. I took Cammie home, checked in with Mother, and walked over to Meg's house. Something buzzed in my brain and fluttered around my heart, something that I couldn't quiet when I thought about trying to talk to her. One of her little sisters answered the door. Come in, Mathilde. Actually, I held up my basket and looked into the house, catching Meg's mother's eye. I was hoping Megs could come to look for mushrooms. Mrs. Swiller nodded. Good idea. The soup's a bit thin tonight. Megs looked from me to her mother. Then she sighed and got her coat and basket. We set out to the edge of town in silence, our knitted scarves and hats bright against the gray afternoon and frosty bare trees. Even through the frost and steam of our breath, the woods reminded me of summer, back when Megs and I could play outside for hours, when the war had seemed so far away. I followed Megs off the path. She stopped to tug up mushrooms. Did she count each mouth as she plucked them? She looked over at me, standing still and clutching the handle of my basket. Aren't you going to get any? Isn't that why you came out here? I knelt beside her and grabbed a couple mushrooms, but their tops popped off in my hands, leaving behind the stumps. You're taking the test, aren't you? I asked. Meg sat back on her heels and looked at me. I have to. Your mother's making you? No, I just have to. For the money? She nodded. Does she want you to take it? I think she's glad she doesn't have to ask me to, that I just told her I would. If Meg sat the test, she would get the required score, whatever it was. She was top of our class in every subject, and she'd beaten the older students in that essay contest, Why I'm Proud to be a Sophorender. She was working through next year's math book in the leftover time each math class when she finished her regular work early. The sun was dropping rapidly. I stood up and pulled my coat tighter. Megs added softly, It could save us. But what if we lose you? Meg's look was steady as she stood up. I told you before, I don't think they'd make us do something dangerous like that. But you don't know that. Stop it. She stamped her foot, and the mushrooms jumped in her basket, some tumbling out. Just stop it, okay? Why do you always have to worry about everything? I swallowed hard as her eyes watered, staring into mine. That's not fair. I dragged the back of her hand across my eyes. I dragged the back of my hand across my eyes, refusing to cry. You wouldn't volunteer if you weren't worried about your family. You don't know what it's like. Your father's still here. The words hung between us, searing. Still here? What about at night, during the bombings, when I don't know where he is or if he'll come back? You say that I worry too much, and that I don't know what it's like to worry. I stared at her, my heart beating fast, but we weren't really angry at each other. Then she nodded. She understood. And I had to understand too. I had to accept what she was going to do, even though she had said she would be there with me whatever happened, and taking the test would be breaking her promise. I stooped, picked up the scattered mushrooms, and dropped them back into her basket. My hands were steady. I have to, she whispered when I stood back up. I know, I said. We both crouched down and started collecting mushrooms again, though I was picky, though I picked as slowly as I could without making it obvious that I was leaving them for her. The war was eating up everything, our food, our sleep, our homes, our fathers, now even each other. We picked until there was nothing left in sight. Then Megs linked her arm through mine, and we were swallowed by the darkness.